Hi, this is Tom Mura from World Class Coaching with this week's animated drill. This week I want to focus on turning. This is a simple progression, but I like the format and how quickly the players are able to get a lot of repetitions, and then we can move from one turn, and I'll discuss 4 different turns today, and move from one to the next very easily, very quickly, and also then progress it to adding pressure and making the exercise a little bit more game realistic as well. So I always like to set this up with no more than 6 people in a group, 6 players. If it's 4 players in a group, that's fantastic. It'll flow even faster. But 4, 5, or 6 are kind of the optimum numbers here. So I've shown 2 different areas. You could have 3 or 4 depending on the number of players you have in your training sessions and how long you want those to be, those lines to be. So here's how I have this set up. The players are each 10 yards away from a central gate. So total of 20 yards. With the central gate will usually be between 2 and 3 yards wide, depending on the age and the ability level of the players, how much room I want them to have to turn. If it's tighter, obviously it's a bit easier for them to turn, a bit more challenging for the passer, making sure that those passes are on target. So I generally have the area between 2 and 3 yards, just depending. And so what we'll do is we'll have player number 1 with the ball. Player number 2 here initiates the action by checking into the middle of the area. So we'll show that player checking into the middle of the gate. And it's important that that player checks through the gate so that they're able to turn around the cones. With this first turn that we're going to do, we'll actually turn back through. But in general, I want the players checking through in order to receive the ball. So then the pass will come in from player number 1 into player number 2's feet, emphasizing that I want the passer to hit the middle of that gate so that the receiving player has the easiest time turning the ball. So what we'll do then is we'll have the player turn around the outside of that cone, and we can have them turn to one side or the other, depending on the type of turn that we're going to do. So for the first turn that I always do, we do a turn called opening the gate, where the player receives the ball with their back foot, so basically turning sideways. So when this player checks to the middle, and we'll just show that player turning and getting to the middle. So when that player number 2, gets into the middle, we'll show that player a little bit differently because I want that player to open up and almost be side on when they receive the ball. So they're going to be turning and they're going to be showing here so that they can receive the ball with their back foot and then turn back out. And this is player number 2 that we moved into the middle here. So they're going to receive that ball and then they're going to turn back out through the gate to the other side. So they're turning this way. So then when they receive the ball and they've turned through the gate, now they're going to make a pass to player number 3 on this side. So player number 3 is then going to have the ball at their feet. So we'll move the ball here. This player will receive it on their back foot, which is tough to show in this drill, but I think you understand what I'm saying. And then pass the ball here to player number 3. So then after turning, we'll have player number 2, after they've turned, after they've passed, then player number 2 will join the end of this line. So we'll get rid of them looking like that. They'll join the end of that line. So we've got player number 2 down here now. Player number 3 has received the ball. So now player number 1 doesn't have the ball anymore. So we want player 1 to then check into the middle. So now when player 1 checks into the middle, we continue that same pattern with player 1 checking to receive the ball through the gate. Want to make sure they get through that gate before the pass is made. Then the pass is made to player number 1 by player number 3. Then player number 1 opens up with the back foot, turns back and passes. So that pattern continues. So the players return back to their same side each time as they turn around and then pass the ball back from where they came. So we'll continue to drill that and get the players to understand the concept of receiving the ball, facing the ball, but then opening up sideways to receive it on the inside of their back foot, then play it away with the outside of their foot before passing it to the player from the line they just came from. So we'll continue that pattern until the players really understand it. Then we'll move on and we'll do other turns. And these are turns that probably familiar with already, but just to illustrate them, perhaps then we'll have the players then turning with the inside of their foot and going to the outside of the cone. So now we want them to receive the ball, but try to turn it with one touch. The focus being on trying to make the turn and move the ball around the outside of that cone with one touch, so that then they can pass the ball back to the line that they came from, so the next player in line receives it, and then the player that just passed follows their pass, checking into the middle. So here we get into timing our runs as well. So it's important that I want the players to keep an eye on the ball and make sure that the pass that player number 1 made back to the next player in line, we'll call that player number 5. So we'll put a number on that player here. So when the ball is passed to number 5, we want number 3 to be watching that pass and checking into the middle, but timing that run so that they arrive as the ball is arriving. We don't want them waiting in that central area. We'll talk to the players about the fact that if they get into that area between the cones before the ball is being passed, now they're just waiting there. And who's waiting there with them? A defender's waiting there with them. So we don't want them getting there too soon. I tell the players I'd rather them go late and fast than early and slow. So we don't want them just jogging into this space. We want them staying out and then checking in fast and late to receive the ball, then turn and make the pass. So timing those movements so that they're more like the movements that they're going to make in the game. You can do this same pattern whether you're using the inside of the foot, the outside of the foot. We can have the players receive the ball with like a Cruyff turn where they receive it behind their standing leg and turn either through the gate or again around the gate, passing back. So this is a familiar pattern that you've probably seen before. The emphasis being on quality of pass, good first touch with the appropriate part of the foot, timing our run even before we get that first touch. So that's important. So making sure that these coaching points are drilled into the players and make sure they really understand what they're getting out of this, and don't just go through the motions of the exercise, but really understand it. So the next thing I'll do is I'll take the cones away and we'll change the nature of the exercise. We're still working on turning, but I'll move the ball just for illustration purposes. I'll move the ball back here to player number 1. And we'll bring player number 2 back to the front of the line. So I'll do this same thing on both sides of the exercise. And what I call this tag turning. So what we'll have is we'll have player number 2 here come back and tag player number 3. So now when player 2 checks for the ball, initially I'll just have the players checking straight to the ball. As they progress and they understand better the pattern of the exercise, we'll get into checking at angles. But to begin with, just getting the players understanding the pattern is the goal here. So then player number 3 follows player number 2 out. So then player number 1 passes the ball into the feet of player number 2. Player number 2 is going to perform a turn. Now, initially, player number 3's role is to be a passive defender, basically be a moving cone, just to put a bit of pressure on the player just with their presence. And then player number 2, their job is to receive the ball and turn away from that defensive presence and then pass back. And we'll just show that here with a turn. So player number 2 will receive the ball. I'll have that player focus on turning away from the pressure. We don't want them turning into the pressure. So we want to make sure that we're turning away from it. So for example, here, I'll just move the turn to this side so it's easier to see. So if the defender is on this side, we'll talk about the receiving player then turning away from that pressure so that they can turn and then make the pass back to the line that they just came from. So now when that happens, player number 2 joins the end of the line here. So the ball has been moved all the way down to player number 4 now. Player number 2 has joined the end of this line, so we'll move their number down there. Now player 3's job is to go and tag player number 1. Thus the name of the exercise, tag turning. So now we have player number 3 coming to tag player number 1. When they've tagged player number 1, they're going to turn, and we'll just make this into a player 3 now. They're going to turn and show for a pass. As they show for a pass, player number 1 follows them out to serve as that passive defender. When they receive the pass, then they turn around that passive defender and, as before, pass to the next player in line. So here, player number 3 would receive the ball. Then they would turn away from the pressure. Pressure is there. They're going to turn there away from that pressure. And then they're going to make a pass to the next player in line here, player number 5. So player number 5 will receive the ball. Player number 3 will then come out after they've passed the ball, rejoin the back of the line, and we'll get rid of these just for illustration purposes because now the ball is with player number 5. So we'll move the ball down to that player. The ball is moved to player 5's feet. Player 4 has just made the pass. We'll remove these just so you can understand kind of the pattern of the play here. Then number 1's job will be to come down and check and tag player number 4. So player 1 is tagging player 4 before turning around and showing for the ball. So that's the pattern of the exercise. Now you can teach all of the important aspects of turning. You can talk about timing the run as we did before. You can talk about turning away from the pressure. So now you can get that checking player to check their shoulder, see where the defender is. As we start out this exercise, as I said, we start with the defender being passive. You can increase the pressure as the players start to understand the exercise. As the players improve, now we can have that defensive player, put their hand on the shoulder of the turning player, perhaps to start with. And, that way the turning player has to see where that pressure is coming from, feel where that pressure is coming from, and turn away. We can have the defensive player take away one side. So we'll tell that defender, look, you stand on one shoulder or the other of the receiving player. So if they come to the middle here, now player number 1 is in the middle, player number 4 is on this side. So when the ball comes in from player 5, player 1 has to check their shoulder, see which side the defender's on, and turn away from that pressure. We'll tell number 4 that if number 1 turns into them, then they're allowed to tackle to win the ball. So that creates incentive for that checking player to make sure they're checking their shoulder, receiving the ball, turning away from the pressure. So you can just continue to repeat that and add layers of pressure to it until you have the players turning under full pressure. They're checking away perhaps at an angle, coming back at an angle, performing that turn before, after checking their shoulder, making sure they're going away. So it's a very realistic exercise that flows quite quickly. So the players get a lot of repetitions while you get the ability to make sure all of the key coaching points are being observed by the players. So this is a great progression with turning that I've used with players as young as U8s, as old as U18s. It just depends on where you want to start and how much time you want to spend on each level of it. Perhaps with older players, spend a very little time on the beginning part of the exercise when they're turning under no pressure and move quickly into the pressure because they can handle that. With younger players, you spend a lot more time in that initial phase, so you make sure the players understand it before adding pressure. So I hope you like that exercise. Try it out with your team and make a comment in the section below and let us know how it goes. Thanks a lot.